everybody, and welcome back to the Renewed Life podcast. I am Ryan McGuigan, and joining me today is somebody that I'm really happy to see. It's a very close friend of mine who I came to know through some of his wild and crazy party buddies that I have represented over the years, and he became a very special case for me insofar as there have been very few people, well, not too few, but there have been a small percentage of people that I can call my clients and later call my very close friends. And Jeffrey King is one of them. Jeffrey is a businessman. He's an entrepreneur and was very successful all throughout his life, and just had one little bit of a hiccup of a problem, and became addicted to alcohol, and had an issue with Adderall that we'll get into later. And after three DUIs, met me, and from then on in, he and I have been friends in sobriety, and friends in reality. And so, everybody, Jeffrey King, Jeff, good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you too, man. Thanks for having me.
Uh, how are things going?
Things are going great. I just hit 6 years, September 22nd, and yeah, I'm just
Yep.
moving, shaking, and popping. I appreciate you for saving my life, and I still owe you my firstborn child's, but we can talk about that another time.
But no, we can talk about it right now.
Okay.
So, I'll tell you what. I'm getting pushed away by a puppy. Why don't you basically just start like this as a meeting, and you can start off wherever you feel comfortable in how you and I first met.
Yeah, so I met Ryan through a good friend who partied a lot, and unfortunately, when I got out of rehab, I had to really change who I hung around with, which sucked. But uh, I kept him close enough, right? I'm not sure if we're using people's names on here, if that's okay, but I'll just leave it as a gentleman, and and we still get dinner here and there because he's still friends with Ryan, but it was ironic. The person that introduced me to the person who saved my life ended up being a person I couldn't hang around with when I got out of rehab, and was basically a 1 year old man since I had started drinking very very early, at the age of 14.
Tell
So
us about that.
yeah, I mean, for most people, I would say alcohol was my courage, right? I remember being socially awkward kid. I'm a first generation Jamaican. My parents came from the island. They came from nothing. They came to America and raised me in the suburbs while my dad maintained his business in the inner city. So, yes, I was in the city of Hartford all the time, but I was raised in the suburbs in the late 80s and 90s, and that was a huge cultural shock for my parents and a huge experience for me. And alcohol and Adderall ended up being that drug of choice that gave me the quote unquote courage to move forward through life. But it ended up being a very slippery slope. There's a timetable on that, a shelf life on it, and I started going down the hill and crashing and burning at a time where I thought my life was, you know, on the up and up and maintaining. So, um, going back to the drinking, like I said, you go to that first high school party, everyone's drinking, everyone's doing everything from the suburbs in the good areas, quote unquote, so to speak. And that first drink gave me the courage to be social. And then just, it came to be that like false reality that alcohol fixes all, issues that you're either scared with or mad with or whatever. And I just partied like a wild animal all throughout high school, into college, outside of college, and going through my own trials and tribulations as a black man in America. the confidence and the ability to keep drinking just started sloping down, right? But the intake kept on going up, and it just ended up crashing and burning. Where I wasn't young enough to bounce back as fast as I used to be, right? And I had to use Adderall as a way to get back from all the drinking that just was a depressant, right, and a downer. So that's kind of like.
When did you start using that?
So I've always
When
had
did you?
AD. So I started using Adderall in college, right? Like I've always had ADD, and I think that teachers wanted to put me on maybe Ritalin and Adderall when I was probably in middle school and high school, but my parents just don't know about that kind of stuff, right? It's like, boy, if you have too much energy, go on outside and go run, right? Like you get the island version of what you need to do with that energy. There's no, hey, I have ADD. you, like you can't concentrate. I'll give you
You do
something to
your dad
concentrate
very
on.
well. Yeah.
He's fresh off the boat, man. Great guy, but there's no
Yeah.
talking about ADD with a Jamaican. That's for sure.
Um, well, you talked about being a black man in America, and obviously, my wife shares her Jamaican roots with your families. Um, and sort of, you were hinting at the social anxieties of growing up in the suburbs, and I can appreciate that, and I would like to I would like you to more specifically go into that period of life and that social anxiety that you felt, and in how alcohol may or may not have been a really wonderful magic drug to help with that social anxiety.
Yeah, so, as a young child, it's hard. You don't know what you don't know. I knew something was off, and I was very angry about it, but I just didn't have the skills to deal with it, and my parents didn't have the skills of being American to help me navigate through what I needed to do as far as what I do now as a black man in America, right? I could go back to my parents, how they got to the suburbs. They lived in Hartford in this apartment, and when you had a child, you weren't able to stay in that apartment. They would tell you if you're having a child, you have to move out because they didn't want the place to be destroyed by, children. So they got pushed out of this
Oh
nice.
wow!
Yeah, they got pushed out of this nice area in Hartford and had to move outside when they had my sister. So, they that was back when redlining was a thing, and the ironic thing was the house they bought ended up being the the landlord that they were renting from, and he knew they were looking for a house, and he never offered them the house that they ended up buying, which was crazy. So they moved into the town, into the suburbs, and I my first experience as far as being a black man in America that made me angry was in fifth grade. Right, I had all these different friends. I was only Jamaican black person on my street for 20 years, and I got pulled over walking home from school in the fifth grade by a police officer. Not one day in a row, 2 days in a row. And my mom marched me down to the police station and said, "You did this to my husband when we moved into town. We never left. You're not going to do this to my son. Absolutely not." And that taught me a life lesson too. But I always knew it was going to be different for me, and I was angry about it, right? And alcohol definitely helped me, you know, put that anger in a spot where I thought it was handled. But it just, alcohol amplifies whatever. If you're in a good mood, sure. If you're in a bad mood, it's even worse, right? So there was a lot of anger and self hatred and all these different things growing up and being exposed to the the social race issues in America, which are a lot different now, but back then it was tough. In less than the 40s and 50s, don't get me wrong, right? But it was still my experience. So
When did you start drinking?
in high school, so 14 years old, um, and so I didn't mesh well with other kids. My father never taught me how to play baseball, right? So it was I didn't fit in any group, so I bounced all around. Like, oh, I don't play baseball well. Yeah, I ended up being a great soccer player, right? Which is more in the roots of the reggae boys in Jamaica. But I didn't fit in any group, and I
Yeah,
spent
yeah.
my entire life bouncing around trying to find friends, and it never worked out. So that was a real tough lesson in life, and it wasn't until rehab where my therapist there just like, you know, gave me the tools in life and said, "Yeah, Jeff, you don't belong to any group, but that means you can go to any group. You can talk to whomever you want, stay as long as you want, and then leave and go on your own accord. You don't need to belong to any group. Some people are stuck to a certain group because of the way they are and where they were raised, and that really like let me go to just accept who I am and accept whomever I'm friends with or not friends with, really. And I can say to this day, everyone likes me, right? Which is crazy because I don't try to stick around too long.
They
So,
do like you. I don't know anybody who has ever said a bad word about you. And I, for the audience's benefit, I do know your dad, and so I know he talks exactly like that. But also I do know the way that you were brought up, and it was very similar to the way that I was brought up. And I think that that probably has a lot to do why I've been blessed with long term sobriety, and you've been blessed with long term sobriety,
oh yeah,
and you were brought up with a sense of discipline and and really is accountability, and that your parents gave you discipline, but also that they held you accountable to the entity that raised you, which is your family, and I think those two things are crucial if somebody is wants to get sober. That's something that they have to fall back on if they have it, and if they don't, they need to learn it. But I want to get into the salad years, the fun years of drinking. Your 20s. I do know you as a successful businessman. So a lot of times in when we talk about our sobriety, we talk about our addiction, we end up focusing on the times that we were literally at our bottom. But it always wasn't like that.
no,
And what I always like to do, I like to tell stories where people who are in their 20s and they're nailing it and they're on top of it right now. I like them to hear stories of how guys like us at that age were the same way, and how this is a chronic disease and it just gets worse and worse and worse. So why don't you tell us about in your 20s what you did, what your accomplishments, and your successful business?
so I want to go back to high school, right? Because
Yep.
drinking and driving was my thing, right? So a lot of people don't understand it. They're like, "Why did you drive? Why didn't you just take an Uber or get a ride or whatever the case may be?" And I tell them, I said, "Listen, I was warped from a very young age as far as drinking and driving, right? So in the West Indian culture, Ray and Nephew is that drink, right? It's 80 proof. It's overproof rum, right? It's like rubbing alcohol. You
Yeah.
can literally just
Overproof.
you can literally blow it out, hit a match, and just like
The
spit
the
flames,
Brazil
right?
the Brazilians call it P2.
Me too. Yeah, yeah. This stuff is brutal, but
Yeah.
this is what Jamaicans drink, right? So, you can just imagine the
Yep.
stories from my father's generation that I saw, right? And I'll never forget. It was the Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson fight. My dad brought me out, right? And I was with my cousin.
The ear chomping.
Yeah, exactly. I just recall as a kid, just loud Jamaicans like, "Look at that body shot! Look at that body shot!" Like bombing him head, bombing him head, bombing him head. And my cousin and I are just laughing, right? Because we're like, these dudes are lit. Oh my god! Like they're drinking Ray and Nephew by the bottle, and it's all guys around. The women are nowhere to be found. It's just a whole bunch of old school Jamaican men just influencing me and my cousin, right? So at the end of the night, my dad had his very successful friend. He owned an electrical company. He had his Ferrari out that night, right? And this guy wanted to drive it home. I remember this as a kid, right? This was when everything just was the wrong lesson, right? Because everything boils down to confidence and what your mind believes you can do. So at the end of the night, this guy wants to drive his car. I see my dad just navigating the whole system with his Jamaican, smoothness, and gets this guy to not drive his car home, gets him to leave it there, brought home, and he brings myself and my cousin home. And I'm like, how are we going to make it home? We're in trouble, right? Like, we live close to a police station. How are we going to scoot by that? And I'm petrified as a kid, but you don't say anything back to your parents at the age of 14, especially not Jamaicans, I could say my dad hit me once, and that was all I needed. And my mom was like, I kind of told you, right? So we're going
Yeah, yeah.
home. We're going home, and he makes it home fine, perfect. And I'm like, oh, so you can drive drunk. You just can't be like, this guy over here. Rest in peace. He, an amazing man, very successful. But that's how I became warped as far as drinking and driving, right? And so in high school, when I got my license, everyone wanted to drive with me. Like, people would be like, "No, I'm going with Jeff. He's the best drunk driver ever." Like, these are things people said to me, right? Like, and, you, and it's like, how could that not warp a young person who thinks they know everything but knows nothing, right? Like, no, he's the best. So we would go to New York City in the 20s, right? Like, we would party all night in New York City, go to the clubs, be
Yeah.
reckless with it, and drive home, right? And on top of that, smoke some ganja, right? So just to make matters worse. But it was, you just felt invincible. It felt like you could do anything you wanted, and the next morning I would wake up and just go play varsity soccer, right? Like, there was no issue, there was no hangover where it's like, okay, I need like 3 days to bounce back, and this is brutal, and that's at like the age of 30, I would say, and beyond. You don't bounce back the way you used to, even in college, right? And so that's where the drinking and driving was the end of me, right? Like, there's the shelf life. In high school and college, you can drink all night. You could drink a 30 rack in a day. I used to play beer pong in my room before I went out with a 30 rack, and then drink another 30 rack, right? And just keep on going. And it's just not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. So, there were some wild nights. I mean, I remember being in New Hampshire in college, and partying in Manchester in a car full of girls, and my best friend's next to me, and we get pulled over for speeding on the highway, and I'm like, all windows down because my car's blacked out with tints, right? So it's like, I don't want to get a ticket for having darked out windows, so you just put all the windows down. And it's freezing. It's like New Hampshire in the middle of November. And the cops, and so the girls are like, "Officer, I'm wasted. That's my boyfriend. He's the sober one bringing me home." And I'm not sober at all, right? Like, I think we hid the bottle in the car, like, you girls hold that, put it in your purse. And the cop, like, came over to me, and because I had this composure, like, Jeff's the best drunk driver, I just kept it together, and he let me go, right? And and that was that. So I mean, I've even had sobriety tests where the officer knew I was wasted, but I was so good at balancing and doing all of the um, field sobriety tests that he let me go. He was like, "I don't understand this. Just go home." And it's like, how do you get away with that? Um, and it just ended up being to the point where I had gotten my third DUI on my birthday, right? Like, you can't get any worse than that. It's like, here's your third DUI. You can't get any more. It's on your birthday, and you scaled your father's company from doing, maybe $300,000 in revenue to like 10x, right? So it was just like this massive crash over the cliff where it's like, I have 20 employees, my parents believe in me, I have bills to pay, a lifestyle to live. I've put myself out there as this person, and now I'm going to prison, and my company's over. And I wanted to run away. I thought of everything to do: move to Jamaica, just get out of here, forget it. Um, and I met you, right? And it was like, so how much money are you gonna lose if you go away for 3 months? And I said, yeah, okay, here's all my money. So what should I do next, right? And you navigated me through the whole path of how to get where I am now.
It was actually a year that you were facing.
It was.
A year.
Yeah, it was. So, but you gave me like the
So
perspective, right? You're like, how much money you would lose in 3 months, and I said,
yeah.
okay, yeah, it was the whole year. So I'm not sure if you want to run through that
So
process of what you did for me, but
Well, no, no, I don't want to. I don't want to focus on that process. What we like to focus on is our addiction and our recovery. And so I want to go back to those years where you took a $300,000 business of your father's, and you made that into a $3 million business, and that's a lot of success. And during that time, you're also telling me that as your business is going like this, your use is doing the same thing, and so you're physically are going like that.
Absolutely.
I don't have, and I know your story with Adderall, and I never had any experience with Adderall. I have ADHD, but I fortunately or unfortunately grew up before that was prescribed to a lot of kids. But I do see in this work that's a recurring subject, Adderall use, and Adderall use at a younger age. Now you started taking it, you said in your 20s, but explain to the viewers, what Adderall is, what it does. It's amphetamine, and in your opinion, what effect that had on your substance use disorder.
Sure. So I'll put it as simple as this: Adderall is cocaine. That's it, right? It's a complete stimulant. It gives you that same
Yeah.
rush that cocaine would give. And I never got into cocaine, but I did it, right, with Adderall pills. So as alcohol being they call it happy hour for a reason. That first drink that you have in the first hour, all the dopamine is just spiking and you're moving a mile a minute and everything is perfect. And then it starts to taper off after an hour. But a lot of people don't stop there, right? Especially addicts like myself. And so at the end of the night when I'm crashing, I'm taking the Adderall so I could drive home because I know I have a meeting in the morning or I've got to do an estimate that's going to require all my focus to do this quantity takeoff and put a number in, a number that's unknown that I'm going to then use to build a project. And if I'm off, I'm screwed, right? So the
Right.
Adderall was a way of keeping that same level of intensity and energy that I needed to compete, but the alcohol was what I was using to handle the stress and the anxieties of just whatever I was going through. Since at a young age, it made me a very social person. So I figured that's what it does. It fixes everything, right? So it was just that constant rotation of drinking too much, being tired, taking Adderall. Wake up in the morning, take an Adderall at 5 in the morning, catch a little bit more sleep, get up, take another Adderall, go to work, and maybe I would have a beer on my lunch break, right? And then after work, I'm working until 7 o'clock at night, putting 80 hours in a week, 40 hours in a week, and you hit dinner. It's like dinner, another drink, and then go to bed, and it's the same process, and it was just nonstop like that. You know,
Um, so, would you consider that you had a co-occurring disorder, that you were addicted to both Adderall and alcohol at the same time?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I was on time released Adderall, right? And I convinced my doctor that the time release made me tired, and sometimes I don't need to take it. Can I have the instance and just have a smaller dosage, but a higher amount, right? So that I could take it whenever I wanted based upon the situation that I was going through, right? If I needed more, double up on the pills. If I only wanted a little bit, you take a little bit, take a half a pill, one pill, and so that's what got me in trouble, right? It was this instant, instead of a time release substance to focus me, and I would just abuse it as I would abuse alcohol, right? It was just the yin and the yang.
How would you abuse it? So how would you abuse it?
So
You talked about that your doctor prescribed it to. I would assume that you had some sort of a prescription where they told you take so many per hour and whatnot. But how long did it take you to go from I'm being prescribed to this stuff by my doctor to on your own saying, okay, I'm going to take this the way I want to take this and start abusing it?
so the time released, I would say, lasted 3 months, when it comes to Adderall, because it's a narcotic, the doctors really aren't trying to switch the gears. If they prescribe you with something, they want to get some information. You have to go back every month, talk, explain how's your eating, how's your sleeping, and obviously, as an alcoholic, I could lie as much as I wanted to, and no one would believe would know the difference, right? So I would say my sleeping's great, my eating's great, and it wasn't, of course not, right? So I would say within the first like couple of weeks, right, I could see the difference in being more focused. So it was like, okay, this is perfect. I can get all my work done, and I can compete and go to work, and everything's fine. So I would say I noticed within the first 2 weeks, and then I would say on month 3, I wasn't sleeping, right? It was the time release was just keeping me wired. So I wanted to be able to take the instants that weren't time released so I could better manage what I wanted to do. So if I needed to sleep more, drink more. If I needed to be up more, take more Adderall. And after 3 months, I was on the instants, and that was that. I was off and running.
Did when you would go back to see your doctor, would they question you about your Adderall use, and would they monitor your Adderall use in any way, or were you just sort of on your own to do whatever you wanted?
No, you're on your own to do whatever you wanted. I mean, they give you if it's a 30-day supply, time release, they give you 30. So if there's once Adderall's in your system, you don't need to take it every day. I could skip a day, right, and then have an extra pill. So that's one way of how like a surplus for myself would end up having is if I was home all day on a rainy day and I didn't need to take any Adderall, what's the point? You know, just be in bed all day with your girlfriend or whomever, and you don't take any Adderall. So that was a way of being able to manipulate it later down the line. But in the beginning, you run through your supply, and you go back and you say, "Yep, I took my quantity, and I'm here for another refill," and they'll give it to you.
Do you think now, as you've told the audience, you and I met after your third DUI. Do you think that Adderall enabled you essentially to be a successful alcoholic for longer than you would have, and essentially get yourself deeper into a hole than you would have been if you had never taken it before?
100%, 100%. This is coffee times 100, right? And it's
Uh,
and it's instant, right? It's as soon as I take it, within 10 minutes, I'm there to go. I don't have to stop at Starbucks and drink two ventis or whatever, which still won't give me the amount of energy that the Adderall would give me over the course of a day and the years, right? So it totally made the drinking worse. The reason why I wanted the instance to begin with was, you go out and you take two or three Adderall instants, and you're in VIP all night, popping bottles, living a wild life, going home, being sexual, and wake up the next morning and do it all over again, right? Like that was the whole beauty behind the Adderall was that it could increase the alcohol consumption to where it made me feel like I was young again. So and I wasn't, right? So yeah, I mean
so you
that's
could
the slippery
basically,
slope.
how when did it take a turn for you? When did it all start turning for the worse?
So I would say in college, I was drinking, taking Adderall, and smoking marijuana. And I think just like a screw came loose between the marijuana and all the drugs, and I developed like this huge paranoia behind smoking marijuana. And that's when I noticed a difference in who I was as far as like my confidence and my managing my anxieties. And I just wouldn't stop smoking weed, but I would have these terrible, episodes every time I smoked where I'd get super paranoid. I'd think someone's after me. I'm hearing things, and eventually I had to give up the marijuana when I went to get my first job as a management trainee individual. I was going to corporate America at the age of 23. I had to take a drug test. Marijuana is in the system for 30 days, so I stopped smoking at that point, and just stuck to the Adderall and the alcohol. But that's when I noticed
Alcohol.
the trifecta wasn't cutting it anymore, right? Like but you're Jamaican.
Right.
Doesn't matter. I don't dreadlocks. I'm not smoking weed anymore. So
So isn't that ironic that a job in corporate America would make you stop using marijuana, but you could continue to use alcohol and Adderall, which at least on a physiological level are far more toxic than marijuana is.
yeah,
That's
it makes
pretty
perfect
ironic.
sense. Yeah, right. Jesus.
All right, let's move forward to you're in my office and you have this third DUI. Did you ever expect that your trip to my office would be sort of the last trip for your addiction?
No, I had no clue. Like I said, I wanted to run away. I just knew that there was no running to Jamaica and making a next life there. Right? You had a business here, families that depended on you. People were having children. There was no way I was running to Jamaica. Right? So it was like, okay, that was a great fantasy. Now let's get back to reality. And I I'll get into what got me to you. Right? My original lawyer was just wrote me off. He looked at me as a paycheck, right? He knew that once I got my second DUI, he probably knew in his mind, he'll be back again. And so when I called about my third DUI, he goes to me, "Yeah, it's over for you. You're going to prison for a year." I was like, "There's no other avenues. There's no way I can redeem myself. Do any? Nope. That's it. You're done." And that's when the thoughts, the fantasies started happening. So I come to you, and you're not telling me what I'm doing yet. You want to hear my story, look into the case, and you said to me, "Yeah, you're going to rehab," and I said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah, you're gonna go check into rehab. This is the facility I think you should go to," and call them and get down there. And it took me 2 weeks to get there. Right? I did not want to go. I called because I knew I had to meet with you again, so I had to tell you that I called, and in the rehab facility they were great. They actually called me every day until I got down there for 2 weeks, and it was the first week that I was just kind of oh yeah yeah I'll be down there and sure 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 right, like still not thinking I'm going. And then the second week it was just like, no, you're going to rehab, buddy, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Why?
It made me let go of all the things that were bothering me, right? It made me focus on myself. It made me find confidence in myself and a natural ability, and it made me, um, have the courage to say, okay, I don't know anything but drinking and doing drugs. I've been doing this since 14 years old, and now I have to stop for the rest of my life. And the facility helped me have the confidence. Yes, I was scared to death when I came out, right? I was petrified, but I knew I had learned everything that I needed to know at that particular moment to make it forward. Like I said, I had scaled my business 10x. I had the ability to be focused, right? So in my mind, I was like, okay, Jeff, you were manifesting. I want the family and the business and all these different things, and boom, DUI on your birthday. And at that moment in rehab, I said, yeah, the universal God was just going to tell you that, yeah, you want all these things, but you're not going to be a drug addict plus have all these things. You're going to have all these things and not be a drug addict. And at that point, I said, yeah, I have to give this up because I know I won't not drink and drive, right? It was ingrained in me, and I knew I couldn't do it anymore. So, you know, you know, the rehab facility taught me everything I needed to know about exercise, right? The three ways that I get dopamine, how drugs were giving me dopamine, and what I needed to do, right, when I got out to maintain my dopamine levels, and the neural pathways that I carved into my brain through the uses of drugs, how I would need to carve in new ones, and they told me it's like it's going to take you 8 to 12 months to find your way through this cravings and the lying to yourself and all these different things that are going to happen to you, and you need to get into your IOP when you get out of here. Take that serious and give yourself 8 to 12 months to shake the cravings. And let me tell you, man, it definitely took that long, but everything I learned in
Yeah.
rehab, I knew I had the tools to fight through that 8 to 12 months. And you know, um, there things that I found that worked for myself that I would recommend to other people. Um, and then there was just the things that were just scientifically the facts that I had to just accept and learn about and
Mhm.
and have a regimen like it was my job, right? It's like this is now your new job. The way you wanted to scale your business, that level of focus you put into your job, you need to put that into this right now because this is the only job that you have, or else my life is over. And that's the approach I took through going to rehab and what I learned coming out. You know,
So, I want to specifically focus for you. These podcasts have been great, and they've been eye opening for me. And so what I've been basically doing is talking to a lot of my alumni, and some of them are 11, 12, 6, 7 years sober, like you. And each of them has, a different pathway. Each of them has a different routine to be able to get sober. I do remember for myself in that first year, I I I shrouded myself in my children, in my two girls, and I maintained that if there's one thing I'm going to be is I'm going to be a really good dad, because I wasn't a very good husband, I wasn't a very good business partner, I wasn't a very good friend, and I had failed at all those things. But I hadn't quite failed as a dad yet. I was going to, but I hadn't. And so I could focus on that. And they were only with me for a short period of time during the month. I only had them about 4 days. So the rest of the time, I had about, like, 24 or 26 days to go ahead and relapse and feel sorry for myself. So I shrouded myself in a book that I just kept reading over and over and over. It was a really thick book and it had a cross on it. And I just kept reading that one over and over and over again to get me through that first year of cravings and that first year of sort of the emotional roller coaster that you go through, if you remember. But you didn't do that.
no,
You did something that no, you did something that I don't envy, but you did something that I admire, and that I wish that myself, I wish that I had done, because it certainly would have made things a lot easier for me. And the reason is that what you did was a lot more social, and a lot more spiritual, because of the interconnection of all the people that you did it with. But I'd like you to take some time here and tell specifically, slowly, the people, once you got out of rehab, what you started to do specifically with your yoga, and specifically with your meditation and your spirituality.
absolutely. Are we using people's names or are we keeping people anonymous? How's I just want to know the format.
No,
So
you can use Pam's name. She won't. Pam won't have a problem, because I'm sure Pam would love the shout out, because that's who
absolutely.
we're talking about, Pam Moranti.
Yeah, she's amazing. That was my like God directed me to her. I was supposed to go to a different IOP in another town, and they never called me back, and it landed me at my IOP in Avon in with Pam, right? So Pam's therapist, she was actually going through her own trials, own part of her life at that moment when I met her. And so yoga was her spiritual connection to how she was going to, bring her life to where she wanted it to be. And, she was an amazing therapist because she had her own private practice. So now she's helping addicts. So she's has that ability to know the medical issues, right, and how to deal with people on a case by case basis. And then she was an excellent yoga teacher, and she pushed us to the max as far as the intensity of yoga, and she taught me and everyone how to meditate, right? So part of IOP was a 3 minute meditation. And when you talk about meditating, people think, a monk sitting in a mountain and, they're there for 2 hours and it scares them off, right? People are just like, I'm not meditating. You want me to be quiet for hours on end? Like, I'm an addict. Like, all I do is have fun, right? So I learned how to meditate for 3 minutes through Pam. And she told me like you're gonna come to yoga every day in the morning and in the evening, and I did it right like for a year straight. You know, those 8 to 12 months, I went to yoga 2 times a day for 6 months straight, and I meditated every day in IOP for the 5 minutes, the 15 minutes, whatever the exercise she put us through for that first 30 days. And then I would do 3D meditations with the headphones through, you know, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music. You can find, you know, hemi-sync, DMT meditations, chakra balancing, and I did those 3D meditations for sometimes an hour, 2 hours. But I was with yoga and meditation every single day. And yeah, I did go to AA groups, but again, I ended up being, uh, you know, going back to my childhood where it was like I don't fit in here. Like these groups aren't really for me. I don't
Uh,
relate to many people
uh,
here, so it was very awkward for me to go to AA groups. And yeah, I found, you know, a young group, you know, in my town here, and I saw people that I went to high school with that, you know, they would get completely wasted, and they stopped using drugs at a very early age because they had, you know, near death experiences where they were a little bit different. They hit their rock bottom a lot earlier than I did, right? And so yeah, that was fun to me, but I just didn't relate to people, right? It was just different for me, um, you know, especially as far as who my past is. So I ended up doing private groups with the people I practiced yoga with, and that was my path. It was yoga, meditation, and private groups with the people that I did yoga with, and met at IOP. So yeah, that was my path, and it's still my path to this day. Have there been times where I stopped, you know, doing yoga the way I need to, as far as every day? Absolutely, but I've always gone back to yoga, which has gotten me back to square one of how I felt 8 to 12 months after getting out of rehab. And to this day, I'll never not do yoga and meditate. I still meditate to this day.
if you look back, um, and you look at yourself as that 14-year-old kid that felt awkward in the social setting that he was in, and felt nervous about social engagement, because you know you didn't look like everybody else. Um, Now that you sit here and you've been through everything that you've gone through, what would you tell that young man that he could do at that age and at that time that's different than what you did, that's more constructive, that's probably more honest, and that's healthier for him to be able to navigate those situations, but also spiritually, be okay with it, and spiritually, uh, be able to accept, basically have acceptance, because you know the numbers aren't really going to change. Is that there's only a certain percentage of people that look like a certain percentage. There's only a certain percentage of African American men in whatever social setting you're always going to get in. This is what we have to deal with in my family. You know, they're going to be the majority of the people that don't look like you. So that's the reality of it, and we have to live in reality. So I guess my question is that how do we recovered people, if we can at all? I don't know whether I'm just wasting my time, but how do we as recovered people help to try to keep others from having to suffer from what we suffered from and put ourselves through because of that social anxiety? You got
Yeah,
anything? Because
absolutely.
I, I know that for my, go ahead.
No, no, go finish. I would say
So
the
like
term
for
for you. Go ahead. No, go. No, 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 you go.
so, I know there's a delay. There's a delay. So, anyways, but like for myself, I've always been small, always.
Same here.
So I've always been, yeah, I've always been teeny, and that for me in male social situations, I have always walked into them with a massive amount of anxiety, because not only am I short, but I have a big personality. And a lot of times my personality will butt up against bigger people's personalities than mine. And bigger people have no problem threatening you with physical violence.
Oh no, yeah, they don't.
And so, in where I grew up in New Britain, that happened quite a lot. So, social situations for me were always filled with anxiety of physical violence, where I would have to defend myself and lose at some sort of physical altercation, and have to go home bruised, and then get yelled at by my father for losing. So it was a no-win situation. But in no way do I ever think that that's the same exact situation that you had to deal with, because it wasn't. And so I guess what I'm asking is how do we what advice would we give to little guys like us, uh, that could keep them from having suffered the same fate as us, which is falling into alcohol for comfort and an aid in those social situations where we feel anxious.
Yeah, I would tell anyone at the age of 14, going through high school and college, is that what you see in front of you is not what you're going to see when you get out of college and get into the real world where you're working every day to make a living for yourself. So try to stay with the most neutral thinking and radical acceptance ever. Like, don't be jealous of the football captain of the football team that has the hottest girl, right? Like, he might not be that person when you're 30 years old. He might be driving a truck. He's not. He might not be the most popular person on campus with the hottest girl when you're an adult. So try not to put so much stock into what you're seeing in front of you right now. Focus more on just who I am, who I am, and find, find comfort and confidence in just being me, right? Accept who I am. Um, I didn't accept that, right? I wanted to be somebody else. Oh, if I'm black, I'm gonna get pulled over, or I'm gonna not get that girl, or I'm gonna be talked to a certain way, or expected to be talking a certain way, right? So I was always just trying to like prove something, right? And striking out. I would tell someone not to do that, right? Forget all of that. It doesn't matter. Find what I'm good at, right? Find some pride into my own culture. I had to do some research to figure out that, like, no, being a black person is amazing, right? I used to not want to be black. I'd be like, oh no, I'm not as dark, or I'm not like I'm. This is the thing that happens in this American culture where there's so much negative press and negative stereotypes pushed towards people of color that they end up having this level of self hatred where they will find anything within them to say, nope, I'm not that type of black person, right? And I would encourage people not to run away from that. Embrace that. Know that, Pratt and Whitney did a study in 1996, right? And it's a salute to black inventors. And it's everything from 1809 to 1906 that black people invented. I had no clue. Elijah McCoy is another person, a great inventor. I started to find that if I took pride into my own people more, and stop looking at this thing through like a black and white thing, look at it from like a person to person, a human perspective. The more pride I had for myself and for my culture and for my people, the happier I was as an individual, because I'm going to come across people who have stereotypes about black people and they're never going to change. And it's not even their fault, right? I would say to anyone, yeah, I would say to anyone, no one, right? No one signs up for their life to say, I want to be this kid with the silver spoon. Sign me up right here. Their parents didn't sign up for that life. No one signs up for the life that they have. So it's better to not get pissed off and mad at anyone and just try to understand why would that person be that way, right? And find peace in that. I'm not saying you have to accept the racist, the person that hates women, the person that hates brown people. I'm not saying you have to interact with that person at all. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is don't let something that a person never signed up for dictate how I feel on a day-to-day basis. it's not important, right? And it's not even relevant. It's not even valid. So like that's the type of advice I would give a person that's young is, you know, just be happy that you have this life and figure out what it is that makes you who you are and just accept that and move forward. Just don't nothing's good, nothing's bad. Everything is a lesson to have knowledge to, do something else. Right? That's how I would try to look at it.
That, so that's the advice to the 14-year-old kid who hasn't started drinking yet. I want to move on to when we were at the top of our addiction. In other words, we were at the peak of our successful drinking, and for you for with the Adderall. For me, that was probably my late 20s. Um, and I don't know where that was for you in your early 20s and your later 20s. I know that you had quit a little bit earlier than me. But what kind of advice would you give to that guy if you could? And you can also tell us that it would have been a complete waste of time talking to that guy. But looking back, if you could go back, say 10 years and rewind that clock, and there you are, there's Jeff King, the guy who just made who 10x'd his dad's company, and he's nailing it. He's nailing it everywhere he goes, and he's just crushing it. And he's got $100,000 truck, and he's got 15 people working for him, and everybody's calling on the phone, and business is great, and everything's going unbelievably. But you know what was going on in that guy's heart and what was going on up here. Uh, you know what's under the surface. So, what would you tell that guy at that point? If there's anything that you could have told him that could have stopped the crash.
Um, Very good question. I would I would tell the person drinking at that age that there's going to be a shelf life to this, so this is not sustainable. You're at your peak, and it's because of genetics and health. And if you're this successful, imagine being 5 times more successful than you are right now. You think you're crushing it right now? Put down that drink and get into a straight life of health and real balance and finding out who you are. And you think you're doing well now, you'll do even better later. There was one thing that when I first met you, right? I didn't know what it was about you. I didn't know that you didn't drink or anything like that. But I was drawn to your energy. And I never understood it until I would say 3 years ago, right? Where I thought I had confidence when I was drinking. No, I had zero confidence. I have more confidence now. I would be a nervous wreck trying to have this conversation with somebody if I was drinking. The chemical reactions, the anxiety from the alcohol. I could be tired. Someone could have be I could be pissed off and irritated because I'm hungover and tired. Right? There's so many things that happen on an emotional level because of the chemical that goes through my body. Like when I was in rehab, a person said to me, "You're a Ferrari. Would you put diesel fuel in a Ferrari?" I was like, "No, that's stupid." And he's like, "Well, then what are you doing with alcohol? You're literally putting diesel fuel in your Ferrari." It's like, well, I like Ferraris. Like I would never do that. That's stupid, right? So that's the advice I would give. The level of confidence I have now, I could never have imagined this to the point where I've been, you know, at this point now, I can go out with people that do drink and it's not an issue for me. But I've had people come up to me and just say, "I like your energy." And I'm like, "What? Like, what do you mean you like my energy? You don't even know who I am." It's the same thing that happened when I saw you. I didn't know why I liked this guy, but I just did, and I wanted to hang around him. And and that never happened to me when I was drinking alcohol. It was like, okay, here comes this asshole again. Let's see what show he's gonna put on this week. Being drunk.
Yeah.
A stranger would never just want to be around me. And I would tell the person that's drinking now, that's crushing it now, you think you have everything right now and that life is great. You have no idea. It's a different level of energy, a different vibe that you give off when you're 100% sober and don't have any drugs in your system.
Do you think now that you're sober, that you have a much more successful business than you would have if you didn't quit drinking?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually um, transitioned over to a different job right now, and I'm working for a municipality, and I'm doing a work development program. Right. I've always wanted to help inner city kids because I knew, as far as who I am, like being a black man in America, I saw things differently, right? But being raised in the
Yeah.
suburbs, I learned things differently. I saw things one way, but I learned another way. So I got a good education, but I still know what the streets are like and how the streets can draw people in. So I've always wanted to work with younger people, and now I have the story, right? I have the street cred where I can talk to anyone that's young and tell them my story. Like, you can't tell me anything. Like, this is what happened to me. So what are you gonna say? Right? Like, I love having that now where I'm able to talk to younger people and help steer them in a good path where they won't have to make some of the mistakes I made, and I have the credentials to show you. Like, here's my prison ID. I went to prison for drinking and driving. You know, here's my
Yeah.
business. Here's everything. What do you want to see? I can show it to you. And I think that's like the biggest blessing that's happened to me so far is that now I can really help other people. And and in construction we have an aging workforce, right? We don't have as many young people that want to build stuff with their
Yeah.
hands and be a craftsman, right? Everyone got pushed to college, like, oh, go get that degree, come out with $400,000 in debt, and not have a good enough job to afford to pay that payment, right? Plus start a family, plus have a house, right? I would I would say there's I would say showing people that there's another way is the biggest blessing for me, because we need more young people if we're going to live in this new sustainable energy AI environment. Who's going to build all this stuff? It's not going to be a Tesla robot, right? We need
Yeah.
we need people. We need people that that are smart, that didn't go through the same era that you went through, my parents went through, that I went through. Things are a lot more fair, so to speak. Now there's less, violence or that would happen to someone just walking to school. Yeah, there's bullying. Yeah, there's more
Mm.
social media stuff, but being sucked into social media, I think you could teach a kid more and how not to fall victim to social media versus just being bullied by walking home from school, right? Like, everyone just runs home to their computers and their phones and they're just checked out. So I think it's a different environment. There's a lot more social pressures now and a lot more anxiety with the meds and the food now. But um, I think that being able to have this workforce development program where I'm able to touch a lot of younger people, it's just like the biggest success I never would have thought I could ever have done without going through what I went through. So um, I'm here now and I'm happy I went through it. To be quite
And would
honest,
it be possible if you were still drinking?
no.
Would you, and not like would it be possible in terms of could you have done it? What I really mean is that were you still drinking? Would you have those feelings of helping other people, or would you be just sort of focusing on me and my 10x or my 20x and my 30x?
Yeah, and that's the point. Like, I wouldn't have the capacity if I was drinking and still taking Adderall. I would not have the capacity to do what I'm doing. I see people that are top level executives, and sure they drink, but I can see who had too much to drink the night before now, right? I was that guy, and I can see how it impacts their mood, right? It impacts their ability to focus and talk high level, that they're at, and it's a ticking time bomb. It chips away. So it's just not possible to do it with the drugs in your system, especially as you get older. You want that wisdom, plus you want the energy, and the energy is what I have now, and the wisdom is what I have now by going through that. And there's no way I could do that with drinking and Adderall.
You're selling yourself short. and because that's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking about your energy. I know that you're full of energy, and I know that you are industrious. But
Okay.
when I first met you, the when I first met you, you did not seem like a guy that would be championing a workforce development program for a bunch of inner city kids who don't have anybody else to champion them. And so, what I'm asking you is, and I'm trying to give you credit, is would you have done any of that stuff if you were still drinking, or is this a result of your sobriety in your spiritual journey?
100% a result of the sobriety and spiritual journey. There's no way I would have done this, um, running a company and just being tired, right, and hungover all the time. I wouldn't have the focus because dealing with younger people, they don't know anything, and it's not their fault, right? They need someone to teach them. They need time, right? Just like it took me 8 to 12 months to get the cravings out of my system, that applies to anybody else, especially a person from, a broken family or that has less than. It's going to require time and patience to deal with them. And yeah, I'm going to help some people, and I'm not going to help certain people, and that's fine, right? But for every person that I can help, and even the person that I quote unquote couldn't help, they're going to learn something that's going to help them in the future, right? I've already had one young person in this program who didn't make it, and I still keep in contact with him, and he's doing better. He's doing
Yeah,
different. Right? He got a job somewhere else. He just wasn't ready for the big leagues that I'm working in right now because there are people that are operating on that high level, right? That are drinking it, but they are doing what they can do, right? So yeah, I think that when there's drugs involved, there's just no way to do more. It's just not possible. Yeah, and to do more, it requires patience, right?
I
And there's no patience with drugs.
my wife told me one time, long time ago. She said, hurt people," and kind of like the corollary of that is people who have been given second chances like to give other people second chances, and you've been given second and third chances
Oh yeah.
in your life, and it's nice to see that you're giving other people a second chance at a successful life. So I wanna thank you for being on. I want to thank you for everything that you do for yourself and your own sobriety. I really want to thank you for what you do for others. And lastly, I want to thank you for being my friend because I'm proud to know you and I'm proud to call you my really close friend. And I love you. And thanks for being on, man. You have a great weekend.
Thanks, man. Love you too. Appreciate everything you've done for me. You're the man.
All right, I'll see you. I'll see you soon.
All right. See you soon. Take care.